You're listening to the Lavender Witch Podcast. We're here to talk about all things related to queer spirituality with a focus on witchcraft and pagan practices. In this place, you are welcome, you are valued, and your story matters. I'm your host, Sam Wise. I'm an author, a columnist, a pagan priestess, and a real-life queer witch. Thanks for joining me today. Okay, friends, today we're doing something a little bit different because as of the day I'm recording this, we are less than 1 month out from the release of my book, Lavender Witchcraft, Crafting Queer Magical Practice, and I am beyond excited. So I thought I would give you guys a little sneak peek, a little taste of what you can expect from the book. And I am actually going to be reading aloud a chapter from the book for today's episode. So this is word for word exactly the content that is in the book. And if you like what you hear today, you can pre-order as an ebook or paperback on Amazon or on any other platform where you like to get your books. Today I will be walking you guys through my chapter on the Wheel of the Year and specifically on a secular, queer, accessible view of the Wheel of the Year and how you can adapt these holidays for your personal practice. Chapter 9, A Queer Wheel of the Year. Everyone loves a good party. No matter who we are or what we believe, taking time to celebrate with the people we love is important. Holidays are set days of the year when we take a break from the grind for some life-affirming celebration. Queer witchcraft has no set calendar of holidays. However, there are some sacred days that are very popular with queer witches, in addition to any other religious, cultural, or secular holidays they may celebrate. This set of witchy holidays is called the Wheel of the Year and is the focus of this chapter. In Chapter 10, we will discuss how to craft rituals for secular holidays and create your own holiday calendar. The modern Wheel of the Year comes from Wicca, but it is by no means exclusive to Wiccans. Many non-Wiccan witches choose to work with at least some of the holidays on the wheel, and the holidays themselves date back to pre-Christian festivals from Western Europe, particularly England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. The Wheel of the Year is even used by some atheist and agnostic witches as a way of connecting with the rhythms and cycles of the natural world. Because of their popularity with a variety of witches and pagans, many major cities have public celebrations for the holidays on the wheel, which can be great opportunities to meet like-minded friends. The Wheel of the Year has 8 spokes, the 8 holidays sometimes called sabbats. The wheel is a solar calendar and is deeply connected to the relationship between the sun and the earth. The Wheel of the Year combines the Germanic celebration of the solstices and equinoxes with the 4 Gallic fire festivals. These holidays have roots in ancient times. Some of the sabbats incorporate Roman and/or Norse traditions. This is because England, where Wicca was founded, has a complex history of religious and historical influences. Before the conversion to Christianity, religion in Britain was a mix of Anglo-Saxon and Celtic practices, with some less prominent Roman and Norse influences. Folk magic in England reflected these mixed cultural influences, and so does the Wheel of the Year. The dates on the Wheel of the Year are based on the progression of the seasons in the Northern Hemisphere, and specifically in Western Europe. Witches in the southern hemisphere often reverse the dates of the sabbats to better match their local seasons. So while witches in the northern hemisphere are celebrating the summer solstice, witches in the southern hemisphere celebrate the winter solstice. I give the dates for both hemispheres in this chapter. There is no requirement to celebrate the Wheel of the Year to be a witch. This holiday calendar may or may not resonate with you, and that's okay. Feel free to only celebrate the holidays that interest you, or to ignore the wheel entirely. I include them here because they are holidays you are most likely to see other witches celebrating, but that doesn't mean you have to include them in your practice. Because of the Wheel of the Year's British roots, some witches choose to use a holiday calendar that is more culturally relevant to them. You might choose to focus only on the Wheel of the Year, to combine it with holidays from your own cultures, or to ignore it entirely. Only you can decide what is right for your practice. The information given on the sabbats in this chapter is meant as a jumping-off point for creating your own celebrations. We'll start with Yule, the winter solstice, when the old year dies and the new year is born. Yule is celebrated between December 21st and 22nd in the Northern Hemisphere, and between June 20th and 21st in the Southern Hemisphere. It is also called the winter solstice or midwinter, and the theme of this Sabbat is the birth of the divine child. Yule is the time of birth. The two previous Sabbats, the fall equinox and Samhain, are connected to themes of death and the underworld. At Yule, our focus shifts to rebirth and new life. The previous year dies, and the new year is born. The winter solstice marks the shortest day and longest night of the year. Astronomically, the Earth's pole is tilted away from the sun, and as a result, the sun appears at its lowest point in the sky. This is technically the first day of winter, although many of us have already been experiencing darkness and cold weather for several weeks on this date. For this reason, this solstice is sometimes called midwinter. At Yule, darkness triumphs over light, and night triumphs over day. It is literally the darkest day of the year. Darkness and night are not bad or scary. In fact, they are deeply necessary parts of life. At Yule, we celebrate the dark night as a time of peaceful rest. At the same time, we welcome back the light and warmth which will begin to return after this solstice. Yule marks the end of the dark half of the year and the beginning of the light half. Yule is all about new beginnings and fresh starts. This is the time to lay to rest the stresses and troubles of the past year and prepare ourselves for new things. This is also a powerful time of year for self-reflection, maybe even with help from a divination tool like tarot cards or a pendulum. The energy of Yule is connected to the birth of the divine child. This motif deals with the birth or rebirth of a sacred being and appears in religion and folklore from all over the world. It can be found in Egyptian stories of the birth of Horus, ancient Roman stories of the birth of Sol Invictus, Buddhist stories of the conception and birth of the Buddha, and Christian stories of the virgin birth of Jesus. In some European cultures, the birth of the divine child is connected with the return of the summer sun, which is born on the winter solstice. While birth is sometimes seen as something only for cisgender, heterosexual people, many myths tell birth stories that break this mold. The Greek father god Zeus gave birth to two of his children, Athena, who was born from his skull, and Dionysus, who was born from his thigh. Mars, the patron god of Rome, was conceived when the goddess Juno was impregnated by the goddess Flora. The Norse god Loki both fathered and gave birth to children. These stories remind us that each pregnancy and birth is unique, and that birth is not restricted to any one gender or orientation. They also remind us that queer and trans parents have been around for a very, very long time. Yule is a time to welcome in the things we wish to birth in the new year, and to celebrate the relationships, families, and communities that bring us joy. It is a very festive holiday with celebrations that literally bring light to the darkest night of the year. Yule has the energy of sitting around the fire with people you love and trust, singing songs and telling stories. There is some overlap between Yule traditions and Christmas traditions. Things like lighting candles on the nights leading up to the solstice, bringing evergreen trees or wreaths into the home, and exchanging gifts are all part of both Christmas and Yule. Sacred space for Yule features many symbols that may seem familiar to anyone who has celebrated Christmas. The space is decorated with boughs of evergreen and mistletoe, possibly even including a tree or a Yule log. Candles and other lights also play a big part in Yule decorations. You could also include an image of the divine infant and/or of the sun. Colors associated with Yule are green, red, white, and gold. Moving on to Imbolc. Imbolc is celebrated on February 1st in the Northern Hemisphere and on August 1st in the Southern Hemisphere. It is also called Imbolg with a G, Brigid's Day, or Candlemas. The theme of this Sabbat is nurturing. Imbolc is the first Gallic holiday of the year. At Imbolc, it is still winter, but we can see the first signs of spring beginning to appear. The days are getting lighter, and we know spring is just around the corner. In agrarian cultures, this is the time of year when ewes, female sheep, start producing milk. Historically, Imbolc was observed by lighting candles to celebrate the increased sunlight as winter came to an end. This is where an alternative name for the holiday, Candlemas, literally candle mass, comes from. Modern Imbolc celebrations still often include lots of candles and other types of lights. Historically, this was also a time for ritual purification with blessed water or a sacred candle flame, which prepared the household and the fields for the coming planting season. Even today, rituals for this Sabbat tend to be focused on purification and blessing. The focus on purification at the beginning of February was also present in ancient Rome. The word February comes from the Latin februa, meaning purification. The februa or februalia was a Roman festival dedicated to ritual purification, especially with fire. Because of this connection to fire, the februalia was connected to the Roman hearth goddess Vesta. We still see this focus on hearth and home in modern Imbolc celebrations. It's a Sabbat for home buddies with a focus on sharing light and warmth with our loved ones. In Celtic countries, Imbolc is associated with the goddess Brig, also called Brigid, Bridget, or Breed. Brig is one of a few pan-Celtic deities, and she was worshipped in some form by nearly every culture under the Celtic umbrella, both in the Isles and on the continent. Brig was so beloved that after the conversion to Christianity, many of her myths were incorporated into the figure of Saint Brigid of Kildare. Saint Brigid is still considered a saint by the Catholic Church today, and her feast day falls on February 1st and incorporates many traditional Imbolc celebrations. Brig/Brigid is the goddess/patron saint of foster mothers, and this aspect of her is emphasized at Imbolc. This side of Brig is especially relevant for queer people, as we may find ourselves raising or caring for children we did not birth ourselves. One of Brig's lessons is that parenthood doesn't have to live up to our culture's stereotypes to be valid. This goddess and saint is associated with both fire and water, the two means of purification at Imbolc. In Gallic cultures, families would invite her into the home and ask her to bless the household. Many modern witches and pagans still honor Brig on Imbolc. The energy of Imbolc is very gentle and uplifting, with themes of nurturing, caregiving, bringing light into the darkness, and hope for spring. This is a day to spend cozied up with the people you love, showing them how much they mean to you. It is also a day to check in with yourself and make sure your own physical and emotional needs are being taken care of. Sacred space for Imbolc celebrations usually features lots of candles. Gold or yellow candles are especially appropriate, as they represent the returning sun. You might also include traditional symbols like the Brigid's cross or sun cross, a cross or X shape woven from straw with a diamond shape where the arms of the cross meet. The colors commonly associated with Imbolc are white, red, yellow, and green. This brings us to the Spring Equinox, which is celebrated between March 20th and 23rd in the Northern Hemisphere and between September 20th and 23rd in the Southern Hemisphere. This holiday is also called Ostara, Easter, or the Rites of Spring. The theme of this Sabbat is the dying and rising deity. This equinox is the first official day of spring, although those of us living in warmer climates may feel the arrival of spring several weeks earlier. In my area, this is the time when dandelions and violets are popping up everywhere I look, and if I'm lucky, I may see baby animals enjoying the warm weather with their parents. The world is waking up after the long, dark days of winter, and the air sings with joy and potential. This is definitely a time of fertility, but we should remember that fertility is about much more than just the literal conception and birth of children. Although, if you were thinking about doing some magic for a pregnancy, adoption, surrogacy, or IVF cycle, now would be an excellent time for it. For those who are a little uncomfortable with talk of fertilized wombs, it can be helpful instead to think of fertility in the agricultural sense. The land is said to be fertile when it can support life, when newly planted seeds have everything they need to grow. Our lives are like that rich, fertile soil, and the spring equinox is a great time to think about the things we want to plant in our lives. This is a wonderful time to start new projects or endeavors. At the spring and fall equinoxes, daytime and nighttime are exactly equal. This only happens twice a year. Balance is a key theme on both of these days. The equinoxes serve as a reminder that, in nature, perfect balance is actually very rare. And because balance is so rare, the equinoxes are powerful days for magic and ritual. The energy of the spring equinox is connected to the motif of the dying and rising deity. This is a religious motif in which a god or goddess dies before returning to life. The dying and rising deity is found in many cultures across the world, such as in stories of Dumuzi in ancient Sumer, Osiris in ancient Egypt, Persephone in ancient Greece, Balder in pre-Christian Scandinavia, and yes, Jesus Christ in Christianity. The motif of the dying and rising deity is closely related to the motif of the descent into the underworld. For example, the myth of Persephone's abduction by Hades could be understood either as a cycle of death and resurrection or as a descent and return from the underworld, depending on how you interpret the ancient texts. Myths of the dying and rising deity usually revolve around agricultural deities. For example, in ancient Egypt, the death and resurrection of Osiris was connected to the planting and sprouting of grain. Planting seeds was seen as a symbolic burial of the great god, and the sprouting plants were seen as proof of his resurrection. Many other deities associated with this motif, like Persephone and Balder, are also associated with plant life. In Western cultures, this connection between the dying and rising deity and the spring equinox survives in yearly Easter celebrations. Originally a Christian holiday based on the older Jewish feast of Passover, Easter marks the resurrection of Jesus Christ after his death. Modern Easter celebrations include colorful eggs, which may be a symbol of rebirth. The egg holds the potential of new life, and the lovely pastel colors remind us of the flowers and young plants that mark the beginning of spring. Sacred space for spring equinox celebrations is decorated with as many different types and colors of flowers as you can get your hands on. You can also include dyed eggs and maybe even decorate them with your favorite symbols of rebirth and transformation. The colors commonly associated with this equinox are springtime pastels, especially green, pink, yellow, and white. This brings us to May Day, which is celebrated on May 1st in the Northern Hemisphere and November 1st in the Southern Hemisphere. Also called Beltane, Bjeltane, Walpurgisnacht, and the Floralia. This Sabbat's theme is the trickster. While the spring equinox marks the beginning of spring, May Day marks its peak. By this time of year, the days are warm and sunny, plant and animal life are abundant, and summer feels right around the corner. For those of us living in warmer climates, it may feel like summer already has one foot in the door. Like Imbolc, May Day has its roots in Gaelic traditions. It is sometimes called Bjeltane in Irish or Beltane in English. Bjeltane sits opposite the wheel from Samhain, another Gaelic festival, and the two have some important parallels. Like Samhain, Bjeltane is known as a time when the veil between the worlds is thin, allowing easier connections between humans and spirits. The category of otherworld spirits most strongly associated with Bjeltane is the fairies, respectfully referred to with euphemisms like the good people or the other crowd. Many Bjeltane traditions in Ireland and Scotland are centered on honoring the good people to gain their blessing and, more importantly, avoid falling victim to their mischief. At its heart, May Day/Bjeltane is a fire festival. The word Bjeltane may be connected to the concept of lucky fire, and the festival is traditionally celebrated in Ireland with bonfires. These were historically true bone fires, with the bones of animals used as fuel for the fire. Many of the oldest Bjeltane rituals involve using fire for blessings and protection. There is an old folk practice in Ireland of building two bonfires and driving livestock between them to bless the animals and protect them from disease. Author Morgan Daimler describes a practice in which the head of the family lights a candle and uses it to bless the door, the four corners of the home, and each family member in turn. I personally feel that fire is an essential part of the spirit of this holiday and make sure to always include real flames in my celebrations, even if all I can do is light a small candle. Flowers play a large part in both Gallic Bealtaine and British May Day celebrations, as well as a related Roman festival, the Floralia. Bringing in the May, or bringing fresh spring flowers into the home to bring blessings and good luck, is a time-honored tradition throughout England, Scotland, and Ireland. Flowers are also used for personal decoration and as gifts for loved ones. The energy of May Day is connected to the trickster archetype. The trickster is an enigmatic figure, often hard to pin down. The trickster exists to defy the mainstream social order by subverting the normal manner of things and refusing to follow the rules society has set out for them. They may seem to create chaos as a result of their actions, but the trickster has a very important purpose of keeping the social order in check by reminding us all how fragile it really is. Often, the trickster is a catalyst for needed change. The trickster archetype is embodied by deities such as the Hellenic Hermes, the Chinese Sun Wukong, and the Norse Loki. Even deities we don't often think of as tricksters can sometimes take on this role, such as when the Sumerian goddess Inanna got her father Ea drunk and tricked him into giving her the May, the skills that make civilization possible. The good people, who play a central role in Gallic Bealtaine lore, can be considered a culture of tricksters. Fairy operates on its own rules, which can sometimes seem like an inversion of our own. When the good people appear in myth and folklore, it is often to teach a lesson by inflicting chaos or mischief on people who don't abide by their rules. Bealtaine rituals and celebrations honor the important social role of these tricksters, while also taking steps to stay on their good side and protect ourselves from their mischief. May 1st is also the feast day of the Christian saint Walpurga. In Germany and some other European countries, Walpurgisnacht, the night before St. Walpurga's Day, is celebrated with bonfires that are said to protect against witches and evil spirits. In ancient Rome, this time of year was marked by the Floralia, a feast honoring the goddess Flora. During the Floralia, people celebrated with sexual innuendos and lighthearted games. Historic May Day festivities in England included erecting large wooden stakes called maypoles and dancing around them with colored ribbons so that the ribbons were wound around the pole. A young woman from the community might be crowned May Queen, and a man dressed as the enigmatic Green Man might lead a parade. Traditional British May Day celebrations have a flirtatious vibe, with young people pairing up at maypole dances and possibly beginning a courtship. Some celebrations involve kissing, although this isn't necessarily sensual kissing, since children also sometimes participate. In other places, May Day has taken on an explicitly sexual aspect. Queer people face a lot of pressure to sanitize our romantic experiences for public consumption. To push back against homophobic and transphobic claims that our identities are deviant or perverse, we've learned to present only the most squeaky clean, wholesome, sexless version of ourselves in public. We avoid even suggesting that queer people are sexual beings. Many queer people feel uncomfortable even kissing their partner or partners in public, for fear of being shamed or harassed. Even in designated queer spaces, sex is often downplayed or limited to late-night, adults-only events. For queer witches, May Day is a yearly reminder that our sexual needs and desires are sacred and worthy of being celebrated. It can be an opportunity to try something new in the bedroom with partners or on our own. It can give us a chance to rediscover what we like and what makes us feel good. It can also be a time to reevaluate our relationship with sex. Even for asexual and celibate witches, May Day can be a powerful time to reaffirm that not having sex can be an equally empowering choice. If you choose to incorporate sexual elements or themes into your May Day celebrations, you must make informed consent your top priority. The easiest way to bring sex into ritual is to plan a private, intimate ritual for just yourself, or just you and your partner or partners. If you are choosing to celebrate with other witches, such as with a coven, make sure everyone who will be participating is involved in planning the ritual and establishing the group's comfort zone. Make sure each participant knows that they can stop at any time, and give people the option to sit out parts of the ritual they aren't personally comfortable participating in. Some elements of sexuality and nudity, such as going skyclad, naked, or physically touching other participants, should only be done if the group unanimously agrees that they feel comfortable including them. Needless to say, any ritual containing nudity or sexual themes should be strictly adults only and invitation only. Rituals that are open to the public are not the place to start experimenting with sacred sexuality. If you decide to plan a ritual with sexual themes, be mindful of the identities of the people you will be sharing sacred space with. If several of your coven mates are queer, it would be tone-deaf and alienating to only focus on heterosexual sexuality in your ritual. Use your creativity and do a little research to make sure all participants feel that their sexuality is being celebrated. Include myths and stories of queer lovers like Gilgamesh and Enkidu, Apollo and Hyacinthus, or Athena and Myrmex. Affirm that all loving sexual partnerships are sacred, regardless of the gender or anatomy of the people involved. If the theme of sacred sexuality does not resonate with you right now, you do not have to include it in your May Day celebrations. You can work with the trickster archetype and the magic of springtime, which will make for a wonderful and meaningful celebration all on their own. Sacred space for May Day celebrations is decorated with fresh, seasonal flowers, much like the spring equinox. If you are mainly drawing from Gallic traditions, you might include yellow flowers, which are believed to bring blessings in Irish lore. Otherwise, any and all colored blooms are welcome. You might include a maypole. This can be anything from a living tree to a small wooden dowel, with colorful ribbons tied around the top. Like the spring equinox, May Day is associated with pastel yellow and pink, but it is also associated with deep, rich shades of green and sometimes red. The most important part of your May Day decor is your sacred fire, whether it takes the form of a small candle or a roaring bonfire. This brings us to the summer solstice, celebrated between June 20th and 21st in the Northern Hemisphere, and between December 21st and 22nd in the Southern Hemisphere. This Sabbat is also called Midsummer and Litha, or Litha, and its theme is the sacred marriage. The summer solstice marks the longest day and shortest night of the year. Astronomically, the Earth's pole is tilted towards the sun, and as a result, the sun appears at its highest point in the sky. This is technically the first day of summer, but in many warmer climates, summer is well underway by the end of June, hence the term midsummer. At the summer solstice, light triumphs over dark and day triumphs over night. It is quite literally the lightest day of the year. And yet, after this solstice, the days begin to shorten as we move into the dark half of the year. The solstice is both a celebration of the light and warmth at their height and a time to welcome the returning dark and cold, which will bring the harvest and the rest and introspection of winter. The fertility themes of the Spring Equinox and May Day shift to a focus on abundance at the summer solstice. We are no longer dealing with just the potential for life and growth. Growth is now happening all around us, and we can see it in the natural world. This solstice is a time to give thanks for the abundance already present in our lives, whether a literal abundant crop in your personal garden, financial abundance, an abundance of joy and love, or some other area of your life that is especially plentiful right now. The energy of the summer solstice is connected to the archetype of the sacred marriage. This religious motif deals with the union of two or more complementary forces, often represented in myths with the marriage of two gods. This is one of the oldest mythic archetypes. It can be found in the courtship of Inanna and Dumuzi, a Sumerian poem that has survived to this day. Other examples include Isis and Osiris in ancient Egypt, Zeus and Hera in ancient Greece, and the Morrigan and the Dagda in Irish mythology. Although we use the term marriage, not all examples of this archetype involve a literal wedding or married couple. The energy of the sacred marriage is present any time two or more people choose to share their lives and resources in a loving union. This includes opposite-sex couples that are not married, such as the Greek Aphrodite and Ares. It also includes same-sex couples, such as the Babylonian Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and polyamorous relationships, such as the Greek Achilles, Patroclus, and Briseis. The sacred marriage is a celebration of love, connection, and cooperation. While this is often expressed in myths as a marriage or a romantic affair, it can also show up in family and/or platonic relationships. Throughout the world, complementary forces of nature are associated with divine siblings, such as the Greek sun god Apollo and moon goddess Artemis, the Norse fertility god Freyr and fertility goddess Freya, and the fawn creator goddess Mawu and her brother Lisa. These sibling relationships are just as important and worthy of celebration as relationships between romantic partners, and choosing to focus on myths about platonic relationships in your solstice rituals can make them more accessible for asexual and aromantic people. The summer solstice is a time to celebrate not only the love between the gods, but also our own loving relationships. It's convenient that the solstice falls during June, which is celebrated as LGBTQ Pride Month in the United States and many other countries. Celebrations of queer love, friendship, and found family are absolutely in keeping with the spirit of the solstice. The sun features heavily in summer solstice lore and celebrations, and this is reflected in sacred space for this Sabbat. You might consider making an image of the sun the central focus of your solstice decorations. You can also include images of embracing couples, happy families, and/or friends enjoying each other's company. You may also include summer greenery. The colors commonly associated with this solstice are gold, yellow, orange, and red. This brings us to Lammas, celebrated on August 1st in the Northern Hemisphere and February 1st in the Southern Hemisphere. This holiday is also called Lunasa, and its theme is the harvest. Lammas, also called Lunasa, is another Gallic holiday. Lammas comes from the Old English word meaning loaf mass and is connected to the harvest of grain. The other name for this holiday, Lunasa, comes from the name of the Irish god Lugh. Throughout England, Ireland, and Scotland, Lunasa/Lammas was historically celebrated with grain-based foods like bread and porridge. Lammas marks the beginning of autumn, or, more accurately, the harvest season. While many of us may still be experiencing summer weather at this time of year, this is also when autumn produce begins to be ready for harvest. This is a time to appreciate the abundance of the harvest and begin preparing for the colder months ahead. Lammas sits across the wheel from Imbolc, and these two holidays can be seen as mirror images of each other. At Imbolc, we celebrate light and warmth in the dark half of the year and prepare for the coming spring. At Lammas, we celebrate the lingering warmth of summer and prepare for the coming winter. While Imbolc is often celebrated indoors around the hearth, Lammas is best celebrated outdoors whenever possible. The Irish name of this holiday translates to Funeral Assembly of Lugh in Old Irish, referencing the belief that Lugh created the festival to honor his deceased foster mother, Tailitiu. Despite this, Lunasa is a very fun and joyous holiday and was historically celebrated in Ireland with harvest festivals and athletic competitions. The energy of Lammas is all about the harvest. Lammas celebrations are about spending time with people you love, enjoying beautiful summer weather, and eating lots of good food. On a deeper level, this is a chance to give thanks to the land for feeding and nurturing us and to honor spirits and deities associated with the harvest. Harvest deities are often some of the most beloved of any pantheon. After all, we all need to eat, and we tend to like the people who keep us fed. Deities associated with the harvest also tend to be connected to hospitality, abundance, and plenty. For example, in Irish lore, the Dagda is said to own a cauldron that can never be emptied, and it is said that no one who eats from this cauldron ever goes away unsatisfied. The Norse sibling deities, Freyr and Freya, are both associated with the harvest and with love and pleasure. In many Native American cultures, corn or maize is personified as a deity who feeds and teaches the people, such as the Maize Woman of Maya mythology, or Selu, the Cherokee Corn Mother. Harvest deities remind us that food is deeply connected to community and family. This connection between food and family can be seen in the tradition of Lunasa hand fasting. In Ireland and Scotland, this was the traditional time of year for hand fasting and weddings. On Lunasa, couples could enter a trial marriage, in which they would live together as a married couple for 1 year before deciding whether to continue the union. At the following year's Lunasa festival, they could either choose to renew their marriage and make it permanent, or walk away without any legal penalty. If you or someone you know is planning a wedding, Lammas/Lunasa would be an appropriate time for it. There is some evidence that Celtic cultures recognized same-sex unions as being similar to a marriage, so queer Lammas weddings are absolutely also appropriate. Lammas is a time to express our gratitude, not only for the food we eat, but for all the blessings in our lives. It is a time especially to acknowledge and celebrate the fruits of our own labor, whether literal or metaphorical. If you worked hard to earn a promotion at your job, or spent hours of your free time working on a creative project, or finally saved up enough to take that vacation you've been dreaming of, these are the result of seeds you have planted and tended to. This is a great time to celebrate your wins from the previous year, big or small. Sacred space for Lammas celebrations incorporates lots of harvest imagery, especially images of grain. Fill your working space with ears of corn, sheaves of wheat, or any other grains you can get your hands on. You could also include symbols associated with the harvest, such as a sickle and pitchfork, or miniature versions of these tools if you're working indoors. Colors associated with Lammas are gold, deep yellow, orange, and red. This brings us to the fall equinox, which is celebrated between September 21st and 23rd in the Northern Hemisphere, and between March 20th and 23rd in the Southern Hemisphere. This is also called the autumn equinox, or Mabon, or you might see it pronounced Mabon. And the theme of this Sabbat is the descent into the underworld. This equinox is the first official day of fall, although if you live in a colder climate, it may feel like fall arrived long before the end of September. In my area, this is the time when the leaves on the trees are beginning to turn to brilliant reds and yellows. The days are getting shorter, the weather is getting colder, and the chill in the air carries the promise of the coming winter. Like the spring equinox, the fall equinox is one of only 2 dates in the year when day and night are exactly equal. Because of this balance between day and night, light and dark, balance in general is a key theme of this Sabbat. The autumn equinox is a good time to take a step back, look at our lives, and see if we can make things a little more balanced. If you've been putting in a lot of overtime at work, now would be a good time to take some time off to spend with loved ones. If you've been spending a lot of time alone, try to schedule something fun with friends. If there is an area of life you've been ignoring because you didn't want to deal with it, household chores and mental health care both often get this treatment, the autumn equinox is a great time to face that task head on. The energy of the fall equinox is connected to the myth of the descent into the underworld. Similar to the myth of the dying and rising deity we celebrated at the spring equinox, the descent deals with an actual journey into the land of the dead. The ancient Greeks actually had a special word for this mythic archetype, katabasis. One of the oldest versions of this motif appears in the story of Inanna's descent, a Sumerian myth in which the goddess Inanna, the queen of heaven, later called Ishtar by the Assyrians and Babylonians, goes to the land of the dead to visit her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. This motif also appears in other myths from cultures all over the world, such as the ancient Greek tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, the Welsh god Prish's journey to Anwen, the other world, and the Japanese god Izanagi going into the land of the dead to look for his wife Izanami. As we noted in our discussion of the spring equinox, the motif of the descent into the underworld and the motif of the dying and rising god are closely related and have a lot of symbolic overlap. The difference is that a descent usually involves a physical journey to the land of the dead, and the person taking this journey may not literally die to get there. In some stories, such as Inanna's descent, a god or goddess journeys to the underworld, dies there, and then is reborn in a combination of both motifs. While the dying and rising god is usually an agricultural deity, anyone can make the journey to the underworld. Orpheus is a musician, Prish is a prince, and Izanagi is a creator deity. Often, but not always, the person making the journey is following a recently deceased loved one, hoping to bring them back to the land of the living. These quests are almost always unsuccessful, reminding us that not even the gods can stop death. In other cases, the journey is to meet with an underworld deity to ask for help or guidance, and these quests may actually succeed. As you might have guessed, while the spring equinox is more focused on resurrection, the fall equinox is about making our peace with death. It is about acknowledging death as a natural part of the life cycle, one that all of us will experience someday. While we acknowledge the grief that death can bring, we also give thanks for death as the great bringer of peace, the end to all suffering, which breaks down old structures and ideas and composts them to nourish new life. For queer witches, the fall equinox can be a powerful time to lay to rest the false selves we've had to live as to keep ourselves safe. For example, a trans witch might hold a funeral ritual for their dead name, or a pansexual witch might lay to rest their time in the closet. These are good deaths because killing our false selves allows us to live more authentically. Don't worry if you're not yet able to safely kill your false self. If you still have to stay closeted at work or around certain family members, this doesn't make you any less valid as a queer person. Always do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe. The fall equinox can also be a time to allow ourselves to grieve for relationships or communities we lost because of homophobia or transphobia. When I first came out as queer, I lost an entire religious community, including several close friends. I have relatives who still won't speak to me. And while I do think I'm better off without these people and their harmful beliefs in my life, I still mourn the connections that I lost because of hate. We can be glad a relationship is over and still feel grief about it ending. If you have recently lost a relationship or had to leave a community because it wasn't safe and supportive for you as a queer person, the fall equinox can be a time to make space for that loss. Sit with yourself and allow yourself to feel your feelings, whatever they may be. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. Sacred space for the fall equinox is decorated with fall leaves, seasonal fruits and vegetables like apples and pumpkins, and anything else that represents autumn to you. You could also include symbols of death and the underworld, such as images of skulls or pomegranates. The colors associated with this holiday are black, deep red, burnt orange, and dark green. And finally, this brings us to Samhain, celebrated on November 1st in the Northern Hemisphere and May 1st in the Southern Hemisphere. This Sabbat is also called All Hallows Eve, and its theme is the beloved dead. Samhain is the final Gallic festival of the year and the last of the 3 harvest festivals. The origin of the word Samhain is unclear, but it may mean summer's end. In agrarian cultures, this was the time of year when the herds were brought in from the summer fields and culled. Culling means reducing the size of a herd by slaughtering some of the animals, both to provide meat for humans and to make sure the remaining animals have enough food to get through the winter. Historically, this was a 3-day festival celebrated in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Many of our modern Halloween celebrations have their roots in historical Samhain celebrations. Trick-or-treating, telling ghost stories, and wearing scary costumes are all traditions that can be traced back to Samhain celebrations before All Hallows Eve existed. Even carving jack-o'-lanterns is an old Samhain tradition. Before the introduction of pumpkins to Europe, they were made from turnips. Of all the sabbats, Samhain is the one most closely associated with death and the dead. Although the descent into the underworld is a focus of fall equinox celebrations, Those stories usually involve the death of a god or hero who will be reborn in the spring. Samhain deals with human death and with the dead themselves. It is said that the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead is thinnest at Samhain, allowing the dead to come back to visit their living loved ones. These visits from deceased loved ones are a source of comfort and joy to those who celebrate Samhain. Historically, Samhain celebrations revolved around honoring our loved ones who have passed on into the land of the dead. In rural Ireland, families would set an extra plate at the table for deceased loved ones and would leave the door to their home open or unlocked so that ghostly family members could stop in for a visit. England has a similar tradition called a dumb supper, in which an extra plate is set for the dead and the entire meal is eaten in total silence. It was also common practice on Samhain to visit the graves of deceased family members and clean them up. Modern witches often celebrate Samhain by setting up a ritual space for their ancestors. Remember, ancestors can be your chosen family, not just blood relatives. You may already have an ancestor shrine, but if you don't, you might add images of your ancestors to your sacred space for this Sabbath. Celebrate your beloved dead by telling their stories and making offerings of the things they loved in life. If you have any family recipes that have been handed down for generations, cooking them and offering them to your ancestors makes a great Samhain ritual, even if the ancestors you honor are not related to you by blood. If someone you love has died in the past year, Samhain would be an appropriate time to officially welcome them into your ancestor shrine. I always revamp my ancestor shrine on Samhain, adding new photos, candles, and personal items that belonged to my beloved dead. This includes adding a photo of anyone I know who has died since last Samhain and who I want to work with as an ancestor. I make offerings of tobacco, coffee, and one or more of my mama's family recipes. I also offer some of the Halloween candy we hand out to trick-or-treaters, because some of my ancestors are the people who took me trick-or-treating when I was a kid. Because Samhain is really about celebrating your own beloved dead, this can be a very personal and intimate holiday. At the same time, Samhain can be a time to express collective grief over losses in a community. In the past, I have organized public Samhain rituals to honor those who lost their lives to police brutality and to the COVID-19 pandemic. These public rituals do the important job of holding space for shared grief, but they also make that grief visible and demand justice for those who have died. This can be a powerful way to mix spirituality with activism. Sacred space for Samhain can include seasonal fruits and vegetables like pumpkins and squash, as well as those associated with death and the dead like pomegranates or apples. You might include flowers, which are a common offering to the dead in many cultures, or modern Halloween symbols like jack-o'-lanterns. Gaelic Samhain celebrations historically included bonfires, so you might choose to make a fire outdoors or include candles in your indoor sacred space. Images of death like skulls, bones, or mourning clothes would also be appropriate. You should also include images of any specific ancestors you are honoring with your ritual. The colors associated with this holiday are black, white, deep red, orange, and gold. Planning a Sabbat ritual. As I've said before, there is no requirement to celebrate any of these holidays to be a witch, and there is no right or wrong way to celebrate any of the Sabbats. I encourage you to do your own research into the parts of each Sabbat that interest you. The parts of a holiday that are important for me may be different from the parts that are important for you. This is why it is so important to craft your own rituals for each of the sabbats. Creating your own ritual allows you to really dig deep into the themes that matter to you. When planning a ritual for one of the sabbats, think about what parts of the sabbat's lore and traditions resonate with you. If you are planning a May Day ritual, do you want to focus on the theme of sacred sex, the theme of fertility, or the trickster archetype? If you are planning a summer solstice ritual, do you want to focus on divine opposites as a sacred marriage or as a pair of siblings? Choose the themes that feel most relevant to you right now. Now, with those themes in mind, choose a focus for your ritual. This can be a specific goal, like manifesting a new job or moving on from a breakup, but it can also be a bit more open. Your goal might simply be to connect with the rhythms of nature and the themes of this Sabbath. Write your goal down because this is the core of your ritual. Once you have a clear goal, think about what ritual actions might be appropriate for this goal. If you're planning a May Day ritual with the goal of celebrating queer sexuality, your ritual action might be a sensual dance. If you're planning a Samhain ritual to honor those killed in transphobic hate crimes, you might read a list of victims' names while another witch sings a funeral chant. Choose a set of actions that make sense for your goal and the feelings you want your ritual to create. As you plan out your ritual actions, be realistic about what you can do with the people and resources available. A single witch practicing alone will not be able to pull off the kind of big, elaborate public ritual that a group of witches could. A witch on a budget might need to keep finances in mind when choosing what to include in a ritual. Think about what is practical for your own situation. Consider whether you want to base your ritual on a sacred story. If you're planning for the fall equinox, you might base your ritual on the story of Inanna's descent. If you are planning for Yule, you might base your ritual on the story of the birth of Horus. Think about how you want to incorporate this story into your ritual. Will you read or recite a version of the myth? Will you act the myth out, either by yourself or with other witches? Will you decorate your sacred space to reflect the story? Now is also a good time to think about whether you want to call on any spiritual allies in your ritual. Do you want to invite local land spirits or your own ancestors to participate? Do you want to call on a deity? Not every ritual needs to have spirits involved, and some witches never call on spirits in their work, but it is something to consider. Just remember to always include an offering for any spirits you call on. Once you have all of the pieces together, write a plan for your ritual. This can be a loose outline or a detailed script. Your plan should cover every step from the opening of the ritual to its conclusion. Once you're done planning it out, read over it to make sure it flows well. If you are planning a public or semi-public ritual, it's a good idea to practice at least once before performing the ritual in front of other people. This is especially important if your ritual involves multiple people. Practicing beforehand gives you a chance to work out any issues you might not have anticipated. Accessibility adjustment. Keep your own needs in mind as you write your rituals. If you know that you'll need to be sitting down for most of the ritual, plan to perform the ritual sitting down with your tools laid out within arm's reach. If you know that you're allergic to a plant that blooms outside this time of year, plan for an indoor ritual. The nice thing about writing your own rituals is being able to tailor them to your own needs. Don't feel like you need to do an elaborate ritual for every Sabbath. If all you can manage right now is to light a candle and say a few quick words while in bed, that is more than enough. And if you really don't feel well, it is absolutely okay to skip a Sabbat. It doesn't make you any less of a witch. And that was the chapter on queering the Wheel of the Year from my upcoming book, Lavender Witchcraft, Crafting Queer Magical Practice, by me, Sam Wise. It comes out on August 25th in the United Kingdom, and on September 1st in the United States. It is currently available for pre-order as both an ebook and a paperback, wherever you like to get your books. And of course, as always, everything will be linked in the show notes if you would like to get yourself a copy. Until next time, I'm Sam Wise. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope that you stay safe and remember that you are magical. I'll see you in the next one.